Excellent. An ale for me. And for my officers. In fact, ales for everyone.
10 Backward. With Rick and Will and Gemma.
Oh, yes.
Last time on
10 Backward.
Today we are going to talk about the Prime Directive.
In South Park, they have square wheels in Canada.
I think, what is he thinking?
What an awful thing to say.
Yeah.
At no point does Wesley apologise.
Everyone just has sex with each other all the time.
Why have you come to the planet with my beautiful blonde people who loves the running and the fucking?
and now the conclusion.
Hello and welcome to 10 Backward, a Star Trek podcast from merry old England. I'm your host, Rick Palmer. My fellow hosts are Rick Everson.
Hello.
Gemma Turland.
Hello.
And Will Turland.
All right.
In the previous episode, we began discussing the Prime Directive and episodes where the protagonists sort of end up meddling with society in violation of the Prime Directive. And in part 2, we're discussing the opposite end of that, where they ended up sticking rigidly to that rule.
Yes. What I like to subtitle the "put things back where you found them" aspect of the Prime Directive.
Indeed.
Before we begin, we've got a little bit of theatre to attend to. We've got some fortune cookies. This is Star Trek related because, of course, Captain Lorca has a bowl of fortune cookies on his desk, doesn't he? So, if you would like to...
Today,
yeah,
all his cookies said, today you will murder someone.
Mine is in German.
Mine is also... No,
If you turn it over, it's fine.
Brilliant.
Mine says, Confucius says, everything has beauty, but not everyone sees it. That's it.
I like it.
Yeah.
Mine says, you will be called to fill a position of high honour and responsibility.
Ooh.
You're going to be Chancellor of the Klingon High Council.
You're going to be the new captain of 10 Backward. There isn't an existing captain of 10 Backward, actually.
Mine says the gambler is like the fisherman. Both have beginner's luck.
Mine says, don't find a fault, find a remedy.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, we had a discussion how Kirk liked to justify breaking the Prime Directive when he thought a society was stagnating, normally because a computer had banned kissing or something. But there's some situations where the Prime Directive had already been broken, either inadvertently, accidentally, maliciously, or unknowingly, where Kirk felt responsibility to restore balance, to undo the damage. Episodes like A Piece of the Action, where they found, before the Prime Directive existed, a ship had left a book about Chicago mobs in the 1920s. So the whole planet was all about 1920s mobsters, and everyone got to run around with guns and fancy suits, and Kirk tried to sort it all out.
And imagine the inspiration for that story had nothing to do with some available mobsters, 1920s mobster sets that happen to be in the studio a lot.
Yeah, they left the big book of budget saving on that planet.
Yeah.
One I watched the other day was Patterns of Force, where a Federation historian visited a planet and then decided the planet could model itself on Nazi Germany.
As you do.
Again, wardrobe department works really well here.
Similar sort of thing with bread and circuses, where we have a version of the Roman Empire that survived through to the 20th century. And again, it's based on, it's a Prime Directive violation that's occurred on a parallel Earth. The Omega Glory, where a Federation captain has beamed down and taken up a position of power in a bizarre communists versus Yankees conflict.
Oh yes, yeah. That is a bizarre episode. I think it starts off really well, and then the whole communists versus Yankees kind of final third is It's just really weird, and it's got a
Bread and Circuses has a slightly, not odd ending, but it has a reveal, doesn't it?
It does, yeah, it does.
Which I'd forgotten about, actually. I mean, I really like Bread and Circuses. It's a fun episode. It's got a lot going on.
I was a bit uncomfortable with that end reveal.
Yeah, me too. But it has a great character called Flavius who really wants to kill them when they find them. He's like, can I please can I kill them? He's like, stop it, Flavius. Let's just see what they want, and then maybe you can kill them. And they're like, oh, fine. And but yeah,
I love murders.
And later on, there's a great line when Flavius and Kirk and McCoy and Spock they've been forced into the arena to fight, and one of the people says, and Flavius won't fight. I'm sure the line is something like, "Fight, Flavius, or we'll do a special on you."
Yes, yeah.
What?
You bring this network's ratings down, Flavius, and we'll do a special on you.
What's a special? Oh, did you know in this episode there's some great bants between McCoy and Spock.
Yes,
like some of the finest bants that they ever have. And there's a line that I wrote down because I loved it so much, where McCoy says to Spock,
"Medical men are trained in logic, Mr. Spock." "Really, Doctor? I had no idea they were trained. Watching you, I assumed it was trial and error."
Great diss on Spock. Oh, that's good. It's really good. I mean, their banter kind of borders on. Actually, it gets pretty harsh at times in this episode. McCoy's really tough on Spock. There's a whole thing where Spock doesn't want to fight, does he, in the arena, and yeah, McCoy's really pissed off at him. Yeah. But then he saves McCoy's life. Yeah. Pointy-eared hobgoblin, he says at some point. But yeah, it's a great Spock McCoy episode. It's a good episode, I think.
And in this episode, the planet they go to doesn't want to reveal itself. It keeps, because they're investigating a ship that's gone missing, aren't they? Yeah, it's another one of those.
Yeah,
and the planet they land on doesn't want to reveal themselves, so it's a weird kind of combination of the Prime Directive and a planet not wanting to reveal itself. So they're sort of stuck, and one Merrick, the Captain Merrick,
he's become the number one, hasn't he?
Yeah.
To Julius Caesar.
So it's got a lot going on. It's a really interesting episode, but yeah, it does have that slightly odd ending.
Yeah, so they encounter a sort of resistance group to the Roman Empire, the sort of 20th century Roman Empire, and they are sun worshippers. But weirdly, when they get back to the ship, Uhura points out that they're not sun worshippers like they worship the sun. They worship a son, the Son of God. And they're like, oh, it's a Christian movement, and they all sort of sit back and they're like, thank goodness, and it's almost like a way of saying, because they're sort of saying, I kind of wish we could have got involved and maybe sorting out all the slavery and that was going on, this whole Prime Directive. But then they're like, oh, it's okay because Christianity's coming along, and that will solve everything.
We don't have to worry about the Prime Directive because Jesus is here.
Don't you understand? It's not the sun up in the sky. It's the Son of God.
Caesar and Christ, they had them both. And the word is spreading only now. Philosophy of total love and total brotherhood that will replace their imperial Rome.
Which is odd, and it's
completely against everything Gene Roddenberry's always done, because he's
wrote
been very anti-religion.
Who wrote that episode? Do we know?
I thought Gene Roddenberry has a story credit, but I don't think he did the script.
But I'm pretty sure I read somewhere he got extra money if he did a rewrite of a script.
Right, okay.
He rewrote every script he could.
Yeah.
It is odd. I mean, I watched that and going, I did not expect this.
No. My take on it was that are they referencing the fact that that sort of Christianity replaced the Roman gods and like that. That is something that sort of happened in the Roman Empire. Christianity came along and there were some big changes, and that's not.
Was it on Easter? Maybe I don't. Maybe it was just a prosaic thing like that, and they added it at the last minute. Or...
But it stands out, doesn't it?
Were they uncomfortable with ending an episode where they left I mean, I haven't seen this episode, but did they leave the world being ruled over by a despot?
They did, basically. Because they stick to the Prime Directive, they don't change anything really.
So were they uncomfortable with the idea of leaving an episode where all these, this world is unchanged, this world is left oppressed?
Yeah.
So they in their way
they wanted to leave
hope.
Like a ray of hope at the end of it, but it's
They may also have been trying to appease some people in the sort of the Bible Belt area. Star Trek managed to upset at various points.
Yeah.
But surely, I don't think Jesus is in space. He's down here. Are they saying that Jesus is in space? Give us we're trying to build bridges because
it's one of your best Scottish accents, right?
please, sir, teach me to do the accent.
There are some things that cannot be taught. You just have to feel them.
Touche. Anyway.
Oh dear.
But in that episode, Scotty's ordered not to rescue them because of the Prime Directive, but he finds a sneaky way around it. He causes a blackout, doesn't he?
Sorry,
What did you say?
What are you going to say?
I was going to say, does he murder a stripper like in Wolf in the Fold?
It's his go-to.
He's like, well, everyone's busy down on that planet. I think I'm going to murder 5 strippers. No, he causes a blackout so that he sort of overloads a whole bunch of electricity so that he can beam up the crew. But it's
circus.
Yeah, you're right. But it's a neat. It's nice. It works, and Kirk makes an effort to. He mentions that in his log at the end. He does say specifically, Scotty did not mess up the.
Commendation to Scotty for not murdering someone.
Not only did Scotty not contradict the Prime Directive, he didn't murder any strippers this episode. So good stuff.
Win-win.
Yeah. But yeah, it's good. It's good stuff, Bread and Circuses, and they, I like that they're pretty strict on the Prime Directive.
Yeah.
I think there's a quote. I can't remember who says this quote. I think it's Kirk. I think Kirk at some point says,
The Star Captain's most solemn oath is that he will give his life, even his entire crew, rather than violate the Prime Directive.
Yes.
and does that come from this episode?
No, it comes from the Omega Glory.
Ah, right, okay. And that's something that I'm sure Picard mentions. Again, it might be an episode that we come back to. Picard makes a point that so we should be willing to give our lives for the Prime Directive, and
but not Wesley's.
But how?
Yeah.
But this is what we're coming down to, isn't it? How do you apply an absolute to something that can apply to a vast range of situations?
Yeah, exactly. Picard's other point about they needed
because if you don't, because of that,
justice.
you can be seen to flip flop on this situation, and so far I think everyone's doing a bit of flip flopping, aren't they?
Yeah.
How do you justify completely leaving the society in Bread and Circuses alone because of the Prime Directive?
Yeah.
While you completely mess up the Kelpians and the Baul.
Yeah.
Another day.
Well, the Kelpians and the Bold, they didn't have Jesus.
No, they didn't leave Jesus.
Yeah.
At a piece of the action patterns of Force, Bread and Circuses and Omega Glory, it's actually always one of ours that has committed a violation, either a rogue captain or a rogue historian.
Yeah.
To watch those bloody historians.
Bloody rogue historians. That would be a great spin-off show.
Rogue historians
So rampaging.
go around fucking up the galaxy.
Yeah. It's like you're like a dull offshoot of Rogue Traders, I guess.
The Section 31 spin-off series, Michelle, will be entirely Giorgio hunting down rogue historians. However, there is a private little war where the Prime Directive violation is in fact committed by Klingons.
Ah, okay.
In this one, we visit the planet Neural, where there are two tribes of people, one of which is friendly to Kirk because he met them when he was a lieutenant.
Yeah.
Bizarrely, they're all pre-warp, so I don't know what mission he met them on and why that happened, but we'll gloss over that for the minute.
Yeah, let's assume it was some kind of sexy hookup, knowing Kirk.
The Klingons supply the opposing tribe with more advanced weaponry, and ultimately Kirk's solution is to give the friendly tribe
More
equal
weaponry.
guns.
Yeah.
So it's kind of let's fix the situation by restoring the balance of power, but also everybody's now got guns.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think Kirk maybe even says it's an imperfect solution, which I very much agree with him. It is a very imperfect solution.
Mr. Spock, ask Scotty how long it would take him to reproduce 100 flintlocks.
I didn't get that exactly, Captain. 100, what?
100 serpents. Serpents for the Garden of Eden.
I just can't reconcile the fact that Kirk had already made contact with these people as an earlier mission. I don't understand how that fits in with the Prime Directive.
Yeah, and I'm comfortable
I completely get that he's taking an action to restore a level of balance because of the Klingons.
But eventually, you're sort of creating a proxy war, aren't you? Basically.
Yeah, basically Kirk's solution is to arm this opposing force better. That doesn't feel like a very Starfleet attitude, does it?
No. I see where he's coming from, but I don't think it's the best solution
that
you could do. Surely you could. Could you not use
diplomacy?
Well, use sensors, just beam up all guns.
Yeah.
Nobody has guns.
Yeah. Then everyone's back. They're all back where they started.
Then is that interference? As well, I suppose the thing is that
you're just removing the guns the Klingons provide.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And it is it is interference, but it's interference
I suppose
in the right direction. The
only issue there is do you have to leave a starship permanently stationed in orbit, beaming up? Because if they've reverse engineered the guns and start to build their own, you're onto a long.
And what do you justify as a weapon? Do you have to beam up all the kitchen knives as well?
Well, no, but if it's something
weaponry
they
they had
themselves.
Okay.
It's only the weaponry that was beyond their capabilities.
Fair
which
enough.
is what the Klingons were coming and saying.
So why did the Klingons give these people weapons? Was it a trade or was it?
They were just dicks.
I believe the planet was located in a strategically useful area, and they couldn't conquer it because of the Organian Treaty. However, if they armed one party and that party gained dominance, and they were friendly to the Klingons, they would basically give them some rights to use
build
an area.
build a station there or
it'll be something like those lines. But it's as Prime Directive goes, it's a thorny issue because there's not really an ideal situation. You can't just leave it.
Yeah.
Because the Klingons get a situation and the whole society is messed up.
But you can just leave it.
You could.
Surely, there's no.
Doing nothing is always an option.
Yeah, always.
But that is like a valid.
But it is.
That's a valid solution, or not a solution as such, but it's a valid option in any scenario. Do nothing.
It is not. Does it directly threaten the Federation?
I think it would do because the Klingons would have a presence in a strategically vulnerable area.
So therefore, they're not doing it for any altruistic.
Well, I think they are because there's always also the side of it that a peaceful tribe is going to get annihilated, which they wouldn't have done if the Klingons weren't going.
Well,
here's some muskets.
Yeah, but surely so. So I suppose the Prime Directive doesn't apply because they've already been contacted by another space-going species.
Did they ask for help? Did the other tribe ask for help, or did they? No,
I'm not
because Kirk knows someone, doesn't he?
Yeah, he's friends with Tyree.
So I guess it could be a bit like the Three Amigos, I guess. Because in the Three Amigos, that little village thinks that the Three Amigos are actual gunfighters, don't they? And then the Three Amigos end up helping that little village.
Yeah.
Santa Poco or something like that. Anyway, so by Three Amigos rules, it's okay, but it's not as fun as the Three Amigos.
No.
So what was?
But yeah, this is it. I'm making a point. I'm not just being funny.
Is your point that the Federation should replace the Prime Directive with the Three Amigos standard?
No, but I think maybe if Kirk if rather than arming the tribe, Kirk had maybe done a bit more maybe everyone dress up and seem to be the Three Amigos, then that might be less of an interference. But just giving them guns seems a bit lazy.
I believe Kirk was bitten by a Mugato, and Tyree's wife had to do a very weird ritual to cure him of the poison that seemed to involve a lot of writhing and.
Oh, all the poison's in my dick.
So I'm not sure you have time for Three Amigo cosplay. So it's kind of it's not a very clear-cut one, this episode, I don't think.
No.
So that's
I don't think there's a straightforward solution
to
that scenario.
No, because I do think that giving them guns and then you just have escalation, so pretty soon you're back with a bunch of rocket launchers, tanks, and where does it stop? As you say, it's a proxy war. And
so this is what season of original series is this?
This is series 2.
I think it's 2. Yeah,
it's like 68, wouldn't it? So I guess the Vietnam War was going on around this time, wasn't it? So is it?
I think I remember reading this was an
allegory for
Yeah. In fact, I think I remember reading that it was originally it was a bit more on the nose, and that it was rewritten to make it a little bit less obvious that it was a Nam allegory. Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Moving on. Should we talk about Who Watches the Watchers?
Yes.
Considered a pretty highly regarded classic for Next Gen.
I think it's worth pointing out that this episode guest stars Leland Palmer from Twin Peaks.
What's the actor's name?
I can't remember.
I thought the actor's name was Leland Palmer.
No, Leland Palmer's the character.
No wonder I'd never heard of him.
Sorry. Yeah, I've written down. It's got Leland Palmer in it. I haven't written down the actor's name. It's good research, I think.
Yeah, that's
it's like 50% research. But he's great in it. He's a good actor.
So to swiftly recap the episode, Who Watches the Watchers shows us that the Federation on occasion establishes a duck-blind observation post to basically gather information on cultures that are at an early stage of development.
We see that again in Insurrection.
We do, yes. So the duck blind is a disguised area, a small research station where they can observe peoples, make a lot of notes, learn about them, and in this particular case, they are...
Ray Wise,
yes, that's it.
Sorry.
They are observing the Mintarkans, who are a proto-Vulcan society. However, an accident reveals the duck blind.
Oops.
And some of the team are captured and discovered by the Mintarkans.
Palmer.
Leland Palmer.
Yes.
The character's called
the
Palmer.
character is called Palmer, yeah.
But he's not the one who's played by the actor who played Leland Palmer.
No,
that's Ray Wise.
Yeah, very meta. But I think
he plays the
accidentally...
Mintarkan who fervently believes in the Picard.
Lico.
Yes.
Lico.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to stop saying words.
Sensibly in this episode.
You have to say words. You're on a podcast. if you sit there not saying words.
But no, I mean, I'm going to say strings of words rather than just words.
They're sensibly in this episode, whereas in Insurrection they put the holographic duck blind right in the middle of the village. At least in this episode they have the sense to put it.
I still have a problem with this duck blind thing and observing people. It's a bit
Could they not put a
It's
ship?
voyeuristic. It's voyeuristic, I would say. I mean, as much as you can say, well, it's cool to study these proto-Vulcans, it is voyeuristic, and it causes the whole set of problems.
Could they not just have
voyeuristic? The duck blind is far enough back; they're not going to see them doing anything intimate.
Because if you look at anthropologists, in real life anthropologists, they kind of get involved. I guess they don't get involved too much, but they're
as much as they're allowed.
Yeah, as much as they're allowed. They're there with the people. They introduce themselves to the people. They're not watching them from behind a bush.
Well,
whereas
the Prime Directive means we have to hide behind a bush.
Yeah, but
what
does that give them the right to study these societies?
I mean, I do think that the presence of a...
If they're treating them like animals. And
why do you hate scientific research?
If it's a prime...
No, but at what point are they considering these sentient creatures to be like bird watching? You know,
it's weird to have a Prime Directive and then just do this. If the Prime Directive, is a number one order.
What benefits do they have from having a holographic duck blind that they don't have from having like a starship in orbit? So we know a starship can monitor. Starship sensors are pretty amazing.
Yeah,
surely they can monitor.
You're still not getting much more information than some dots are moving around.
Yeah, but you could look at how the dots are moving. Be like, oh, that dot's moving that way.
Right.
That dot must be a doctor.
I think this dot likes this dot.
Oh, but this dot's saying this dot's wife. Oh my word!
See, now you're just getting into an elaborate Tamagotchi, or you're playing The Sims. If you look at, say, Homewood, where the Boralans were about to become extinct because of an ecological disaster. The point of the duck blind is we gather information on the culture, and even in our own minimal way, we have preserved some memory of them. So if anything had happened to them in Tarkans, if an asteroid had come and wiped them out, extinction level event, according to the dinosaurs, there'd be some memory. We'd have understood something about them.
Well, yes,
yeah.
But you're not giving them any respect. You're simply seeing them as data. Aren't you? You're not respecting them enough to interact with them.
They're not androids.
But we can't we can't interact with them because of the Prime Directive.
Yeah, but what does it matter?
Well, it could change the course of their cultural development.
No. What does it matter that you're recording them if you're simply recording them as data? You're never going to actually understand them if you're just watching them from a booth, are you? And I think that.
But it's kind of the best you can do, I guess, with adhering to the Prime Directive.
What right do you have to do that?
It is interfering.
It is interfering, but it's not. What right do they have to sit and watch these people that they don't deem as worthy of interaction, or they think that they don't want? I don't know. I suppose
like if you consider a society to be primitive enough that you shouldn't be contacting them, then why put a holographic duck blind near their village and watch them? Why?
I suppose ultimately,
what are you going to gain from doing that?
Yeah.
Because they're not doing it for them.
You can
doing
gain
it for your gain.
more understanding about yourselves, though, because
But what right do you have to use them in that way? To just understand yourself.
You're observing them, but it doesn't impact them. It doesn't hurt them.
But it shows a distinct lack of respect.
Yeah. I agree with Gemma. I think it's just it's weird to kind of just turn up, hide yourselves, and watch them as a for the sake of learning it. It's not. You're never going to really know what they're about because you're not interacting with them, and ultimately you're observing them because you think that they're at a point in their progression that's relative to another species pass. So you think that you're, by that you probably see yourself as more advanced than it. And the fact that you're hiding and you have the ability to hide kind of would indicate that too, I think. And I don't know. I just think that attitude causes the issue that we see in this episode. That's what I would say anyway.
I suppose it does.
Yeah,
I mean, it does.
The practice of doing it causes the problems that occur. And I just feel like there's a lot to be learned. And yeah, I get what you're saying, that you're learning the stuff about them, and it's not a complete picture because if you don't talk to them, but under the Prime Directive you can't. I still think some knowledge is better than no knowledge.
True, but
and it's
I mean,
fascinating because you look at how they develop, how this proto-Vulcan thing developed, and then you look at how the Vulcans understand their history, which is possibly incomplete, as it's a history of war and violence, and probably there's a lot of records that survive. And does this give you new insight or ideas into the Vulcan development and history? Is it
a chance to kind of look back in time at your own society's
but the thing is, though,
what right do they have to say, okay, these people are we won't interact with them because we don't want to influence them in any way. But we want to study them because we think studying them will teach us something about ourselves. What right do they have to kind of use this society in that way when they don't, when they otherwise they're blocking them off from themselves.
Yeah, and
they're happy to kind of
like that society doesn't get anything out of it, but like it's not a reciprocal relationship.
In 500-600 years, that society may develop to a point where contact can occur, and actually that might then find those records are really useful to them.
But there's a point in the episode where Picard hails this society as having abandoned superstition, and he doesn't want to sabotage that achievement. But this wouldn't even be an issue if they hadn't put that stupid observation post there.
Yeah, but they put it there with the expectation that it would work and they wouldn't have this catastrophic failure.
Yeah, but we've seen 2 observation posts in Star Trek and both have fucked up.
That's true.
Well, in fairness, the other one went up because of a malfunctioning data caused by the fact he uncovered dodgy dealings.
Yeah.
So that wasn't a malfunction as much as it was.
I just think
the whole thing was a shady operation.
I just think you can frame it however you want. If you put a presence on that planet to look at these people, you're asking for trouble, and trouble happened.
Yeah. It's a calculated risk, and in that particular instance, it went catastrophically wrong. Yeah.
But this is a good example of Picard willing to put his money where his mouth is, because he talks about how we should be willing to die for the Prime Directive. Take it so seriously that you should be willing to die to protect that, and he literally puts his life on the line. He says, he can be shot by a bow and arrow.
But this is a weird episode.
That he's not a god.
Sorry, this is a weird episode in the fact that Picard is at the centre of this issue because Lico, Ray Wise, he gets beamed up because he's injured, isn't he? When he's injured and they Dr. Crusher decides to beam him up to heal him, and in sick bay he sees them tending to him and hears the name Picard and immediately gets mind wiped. Doesn't work.
Turns out
and so Picard.
I think isn't it? Wipe his mind.
In this episode, Picard he is super unhappy about this whole set of events from the moment Crusher beams him on board to help to save his life. Picard is unhappy.
A real beam.
And then it gets even worse because they think of Picard as a god, and Picard gets even more unhappy. And I think I have to admit, if the Mentakans didn't see Picard as their god, I think he might not have acted in quite the same way, because There's a point in the episode where he says,
millennia ago, they abandoned their belief in the supernatural. Now you are asking me to sabotage that achievement, to send them back into the dark ages of superstition and ignorance and fear? No!
"No," he says.
Yeah,
and
it's really
I agree that this interference could potentially be a setback. But I think if it didn't involve him, I don't think, because he's an archaeologist, he's an anthropologist in other ways. The Federation contains dozens of species, and I can't see that all these species wouldn't have a concept of the supernatural or superstition. So it's interesting for me because I think in this episode, Picard he's perturbed by being personally involved in this situation.
Yeah.
I think some of it also comes from the fact that Star Trek depicts monocultures. So when they say they move beyond superstition, probably a superstitious religious outlook on life was a massive defining feature, and now they've moved beyond that, and there's a big science thing behind it. And, it's obviously an early stage development, but because Star Trek monocultures, that will be the thing. So he's essentially faced with rewinding them.
But I don't I don't think science and religion are mutually exclusive.
No, but as I say, Star Trek depicts monocultures, and it kind of does veer that way sometimes.
Fair enough.
But I do take your point. It's quite interesting. If it hadn't have been Picard, if he hadn't gone down to sick bay at that point, if Wesley had popped in for a chat with his mum,
or Data,
or beamed down, going about the Wesley,
or Geordie had been eating some hors d'oeuvres,
while thinking about his holographic girlfriend, and how much he hated being in the room with Barclay.
Can't stand the guy. Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? But this episode, Picard is.
I feel that Crusher beaming Liko up is actually in line with the Prime Directive because he's only injured by the reveal of the duck blind.
Yeah.
And so she's just trying to undo that damage.
Yeah.
And it's compassion, isn't it?
Yeah.
You can't.
You can't. It would be asking her to go against her very nature, but leave him to die, and it would be a death caused by the reveal and the breaking of the Prime Directive. So by curing him, unfortunately, she's just shit at that mind wipe.
Yeah. Nobody can do it except Pulaski, can they? They can't.
Literally, Crusher never manages it. She never ever manages it.
I think they try to get in Homewood, and it doesn't work.
Well, they don't.
Yeah.
But they don't even try it.
I think she says their brain chemistry is incompatible.
Yeah. That just meant she didn't know how to do it. But this is like, in a way, this episode is a bit like it's like a Prime Directive propaganda movie.
Yeah.
This is what could happen if the Prime Directive gets violated. Things could all go wrong.
Yeah, because Picard's constantly trying to sort of just avoid doing any further breaking, to the point in the end he has to break it, undo the damage that's been done.
Yeah.
I think I have to admit, I can imagine Patrick Stewart getting the script for this. He's polishing his dome piece, reading the script.
What?
Polishing his dome piece.
No.
It's not a visual medium, sorry. He's polishing his dome piece. No, his penis.
His action isn't helpful.
His top of his head. I'm imagining that the...
Then why is it down there then?
Because it's separate to it. He puts it on.
What's underneath? He takes his head off.
The top of his head. I imagine the top of his head is this look. It's like his saddle, like a saddle.
Are you confusing him with Crichton from Red Dwarf?
No, I'm imagining Patrick Stewart has his own personal shiny top of his head.
Oh right, so maybe he has actual hair, and his bald head is.
And he's like, I can't wait to.
Where's this idea come from?
I can't wait to chew through this episode. I can't wait to chew through this episode. This has got some great speeches in it and great soliloquies. And he puts on his dome piece, and then he goes out. And then he goes out to filming.
I don't remember what we were talking about. Was this a Prime Directive episode?
No, I'm just saying that I imagine Patrick Stewart really enjoyed looked at the script for this episode, and you know, and that goes into sometimes I think a lot of when we think about the episodes we talk about, there is an element to it of the script and the actors behind it, and they do go through it and they imagine themselves prior to being on screen how they will go through it. And I think I can imagine this is a script that Patrick Stewart would have liked, because he's front and main, isn't he? He's front and main in this episode. And so I don't know what point I was trying to make. I just but yeah, that
Dome piece.
They call in I got that term from Adventure Time. So they call the head a dome piece in that. So I can't lay claim to that term.
Well, you shouldn't.
Hey, he got it. He got a few laughs.
So I think we should talk about another episode.
Yeah, moving on.
What's your next one on your list?
First Contact. Not the movie with the Borg, the episode.
Okay.
So there's a society that's on the verge of achieving warp travel. And so in preparation for this this achievement and the eventual contact that would come from that, there's an observation team goes down to the planet, and Riker unfortunately is injured and taken to a hospital where it's revealed he's actually undercover in disguise and he's not really. And then shenanigans ensue as people want to find, as the alien becomes an in-demand thing. One lady wants to have sex with the alien. Other people are more concerned about the impact of alien contact on the culture as a whole.
This is once again another example of the Federation taking a massive risk. Knowing what the Prime Directive is. This goes beyond holographic duck blinds. This is like, let's just stick a guy in there. And let's make it the most sex crazed guy we've got.
In Who Watches the Watchers, they do that, don't they? Riker and Troy go undercover.
Yeah, that's right. That's their first time. Riker can't wait to get down there, go undercover. Loves it. Surgically alter me the fuck up, he says. That's a quote from the episode. I'll loop it in.
No, you can't. Don't even try.
Shut up! I said shut up! As in close your mouth and stop talking.
So very awkward situation obviously ensued. What's interesting in this is ultimately the planet itself decides to back off from the contact, and they say, I don't think our populace is ready for it, and they delay their warp flights until they can sort of adequately prepare the population. That's kind of like quite interesting.
Yeah.
The idea of delaying a big move so people are ready for it and all preparations are made. It's something apparently foreign to some governments at the moment. Not referencing anything.
I don't know what you
heard. We all know
talking about there,
Rick. Which is interesting. The fact that when Riker has sex with one of your population, you decide actually no more alien contacts. What the hell did he do to her?
My people are not ready to accept what you represent. Everything that happened in the hospital proves that. And Krola is the best evidence of all. We must slow down. Allow those who are like him to join us in the present before we can move into the future.
What's the next thing?
What I think is one of the ultimate we better fix this episodes is Voyager's False Prophets, where Voyager encounters a planet where two Ferengi, who have been stranded here by the Barzan wormhole, referencing back to a TNG episode, have set themselves up as the sages of this planet's mythology, and enjoy, with the use of their replicator, some fame, prestige and wealth on this planet. And Voyager goes to great lengths to remove the Ferengi within the confines of the planet's acceptable mythology and culture, not to just sort of make worse cultural pollution. And it's quite a lot of fun, really. It includes dressing Neelix up as a Ferengi at one point.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm. And I think at some point Tom Paris has to sell some of his shoes. All kinds of wacky shenanigans.
You sold me. You sold me on it.
Episode is off the hook.
shoe selling.
Neelix is a Ferengi. Oh my word!
There is a there's a character who goes around telling the tales and myths of the sages and all the prophecies around it. He's quite a fun character. He has an eye patch. I think he changes eyes on it or something like that at some point. I think the actor's actually going to be at Destination Star Trek this year.
Ah, okay, cool.
So that's quite a good one. And yes, ultimately they managed to get the Ferengi off planet. The Ferengi attempt to use the Barzan wormhole to get back to the Alpha Quadrant. Something goes wrong and the wormhole collapses and the Ferengi end up who knows where, never to be heard of again.
Yeah, it's quite a harsh ending for them, isn't it? But it's sort of their own doing, isn't it, I think. Voyager were kind of trying to help them in the end. But
what I like is they're very, very heavily committed to maintaining the Prime Directive.
Yeah.
And the fact that the Ferengi have interfered with this culture within the confines of that culture's own myths and legends is kind of like, well, it's almost a handy get out actually, because the Ferengi could have gone a completely different way about it and corrupted that planet's that culture's course. But they didn't, and allowed Voyager the chance to remove them in the same way.
Yeah.
It's quite cool, even though it's a bit of a sort of a throwaway fun episode. One thing I wanted to bring up is when in terms of Voyager, you go back to Caretaker, and Tuvok states towards the end that they should just use the Caretaker's array to get home. The Prime Directive applies, they don't need to do anything else there. Whereas Janeway feels very differently, says they are involved and they can't let the array fall into the Kazon's hands.
Any action we take to protect the Okapa would affect the balance of power in this system. The Prime Directive would seem to apply.
Would it? We never asked to be involved, Tuvok. But we are.
I could just go and wonder what everyone thinks in terms of the Prime Directive application of that.
Oh yeah, good question.
Because that is, the Caretaker's array is a very advanced piece of technology. If the Kazon get hold of that, the impact on the balance of power in that quadrant, and very directly short term on the Ocampa, would be devastating and horrific.
But what about the whole non-interference thing? Isn't that interfering?
But then,
I guess.
In terms of, say, like the Klingons providing guns to a primitive village, that's a outside interference that's not the Federation's making, because the Caretaker's already interfered, and by leaving that technology there, can cause further disruption and cultural contamination.
But it's not the Federation's job to police.
It isn't, but they are in a position to remove advanced technology that would have a massive impact on the balance of power.
But
and as opposed to, say, like Private at War, they're not then going to just give the Ocampa a similar equipped array and have a war by proxy. They're going to remove it entirely. Or, as Tuvok says, well, nothing to do with us, let's just use technology to go home and leave the Kazon and the Ocampa and whoever else to sort it all out.
I think the Prime Directive gives you the ability to do that if you want. Like, it gives you the ability to give yourself a reason that you didn't do a thing you wanted to, perhaps. And perhaps the Federation, Starfleet wants captains who don't go with their heart all the time. They remain level-headed. But with Voyager, the circumstances that happen to it are so bizarre. It must be hard not to think, well, for whatever reason we're in this place. We have this opportunity to do this thing. We could, do something to help these people, and that's a big part of, for whatever you want to say about Starfleet and the Federation, I would say that there is generally the concept of helping people, and so I think Janeway did the right thing. It's a really tough decision to make. But
okay, so do you think she did the right thing morally or by the Prime Directive?
I don't think
I don't know.
the Prime Directive covers that.
I think, I think she did the right thing morally. Prime Directive wise, I don't know.
In going back to pen pals again, they talk a bit about the idea of fate, and destiny, and I think the idea is that they're saying that it's happened that the Enterprise is here at this time. I think the argument for fate could apply here, that Voyager is here at this time.
Data likes ham radios.
Yeah.
To be fair, Data's hobby saved that society, and fair play to Data for getting all his ham radio equipment out on the bridge.
In relation to the caretaker, because in Pen Pals they say, I can't remember who says this.
If there is a cosmic plan, are we not a part of it? Our presence at this place, at this moment in time, could be a part of that fate.
Right, and it could be part of that plan that we interfere.
This feels like that applies directly to caretaker.
Riker's fate and destiny argument, I think, falls apart, because who's to say that the crew are outside of predetermined fate? I think that's nonsense.
Yeah, if you believe in fate, then everything that happens.
Yeah, and also
you essentially reject the concept of free will, don't you?
And that works really well if the person that has that reasoning is good, but if they're not, if they're evil or corrupt, then they can just say, well,
the caretaker could have made a big mistake and pulled a Borg cube through into the.
Gee, that would have been awkward, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Whoops.
Well, I mean, the very fact that Tuvok seems to say he's quite easily identified the send people back home again after pulling them across the galaxy button on the caretaker's array seems to suggest that they wouldn't be invulnerable from Borg assimilation.
Yeah.
Especially if the caretaker died, that technology is there open for anyone who can go in and pick it apart and reverse engineer it.
Yeah. I mean, who's to say that the Kazon Nistrum shouldn't have had that technology from the caretaker? Maybe that would have sort of changed their society. Maybe there would have been repercussions of that.
The Kazon are a bit like the Kazon are a bit like Saru species, the Kelpians, because the Kazon share a planet with another race, don't they?
They were oppressed by the Trabe, yeah.
I'm pretty sure the Trabe and the Kazon originally lived on the same one, because now the Kazon are sort of nomadic, aren't they?
Yeah, they sort of overthrew the Trabe as their oppressors, took their ships and just sort of formed like almost gangs. So you got the Nistrum, the Ogler, and the various other ones.
Yeah.
But the Kazon were an analogy for street gangs at the time.
Yeah.
But not in a cool West Side Story sort of way.
No.
Or even a cool Warriors way. They were just like lame Klingons, weren't they?
Yeah, they were. They were like lame Klingons. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think anything we learn about the Kazon suggests that access to the caretaker's array technology would have had any consequence but unfortunate for anyone in the vicinity, really.
I find it hard to argue against that. My heart's not in it. Just sort of kind of throw it out there. But I knew the answer already. Yeah.
Okay. So I think we've kind of covered some of the key episodes.
Yeah.
I want to throw in a quote from Captain Picard from the episode Symbiosis, first season episode that I don't know, not massively memorable.
Wait, hold on 1 second. I've just thought of one other episode we haven't covered. Enterprise's Dear Doctor.
Let's talk about Dear Doctor.
Because that is a great episode.
So, that focuses
really
on a doctor who works on deer.
Oh my god. I'm pressing stop on this
New
podcast.
for an Animal Planet, Dear Doctor.
Pressing stop on Rick.
Yeah. So Dear Doctor, we get this is a pre-Prime Directive Prime Directive episode, and we get a moral quandary about a civilization which there's effectively the human equivalent of Neanderthals and and Homo sapiens, right?
Yeah.
And the Homo sapien version of this species are dying out. They have a genetic disease, and the Enterprise comes across a ship that's come out. They're pre-warp. It's not. It's a ship with impulse drive, for not warp, and they ask for help, and Dr. Phlox finds a cure for this genetic disease, but he also finds that this supposedly lesser species, the sort of Neanderthal equivalent.
Neanderthal were not lesser than Homo sapiens.
No.
Let's just state. Anyway.
No. But that's how they consider them to be lesser. But they discover that
actually
no, they're not. They're intelligent, and that they have the potential to be the superior species on this planet. So Dr. Phlox has a quandary. Does he give this supposedly superior species, the dominant species, the cure, or does he let them die out and let natural evolution take its course and let the other species
have their time?
The make, yeah.
Or option 3, encourage them to do it. The two species to do it.
Oh goodness! well, yeah. I mean, wait a minute.
You know what?
I'm gonna.
I reckon. You know what? I think there's a good chance that all 4 of us probably have some Neanderthal DNA in us.
Well, yeah.
The gene for red hair is a Neanderthal gene. Interestingly.
Right. I didn't know that.
But yeah, so that's the third option, isn't it? Dr. Fox can say, well, you know,
they didn't go into that in that episode. But I mean, that would have been interesting to have them debate that.
Because there's a bit like the episode up the long ladder, where there's those two peoples, isn't it? There's a super fertile space Irish, and the kind of
so
aloof
subtle next gen at that
the
stage,
aloof,
right?
and the aloof other guys
who clones
who are going to sort of die out, aren't they? If
they're cloning each other because they don't like to.
And the resolution to that episode was to kind of
so they go be intimate with the space Irish
to do it. And that would it is kind of similar. I didn't when I started that analogy I wasn't sure where it was going, but it actually turned out to be apt.
Except I do apologise to all our red-haired listeners that Rick has called Neanderthals.
But Neanderthal isn't an insult.
No, it's not. It's not. But it can be used as well.
We're going back to
it's science.
We have a common acquaintance called Adam. I'm not going to mention his surname, you may not appreciate it, but you all know what I mean. And I was in an art class at A-level with him, and basically the point of everyone was sort of sat round in weird positions and we were drawing each other in portrait style, and the art teacher commented that I had inadvertently made Adam appear Neanderthal by the way I'd drawn his brow, and it was definitely given in a negative style, so Well, I get what you're saying. I'm just saying it's potentially out there that some people may see it as a negative. So
yeah, I guess there's a
it was
stigma
not intended
around.
To be a negative to any of our red-haired listeners.
Yeah, and you just weren't great at drawing human faces.
I did in fact give up A-level art and did sociology instead.
Good work.
Yeah.
Getting back to Dear Doctor, I have a quote that I'd like to read out from Dear Doctor, which is from Captain Archer, and it's a great quote. It's a little bit on the nose.
Someday, my people are going to come up with some sort of a doctrine, something that tells us what we can and can't do out here, should and shouldn't do. But until somebody tells me that they've drafted that directive, I'm going to have to remind myself every day that we didn't come out here to play God.
What's that got to do with this episode?
No, I don't know. Yeah, that's a good point.
You say a bit on the nose. I say clunky and forced.
Right up the nose.
I think when he says Directive. He turns to camera and winks, and then he whispers, "I mean the Prime Directive." Right?
Is it clunky? It's almost as clunky. It's almost as clunky as in Star Trek First Contact, where Zephyr Cochrane says, "So you guys are all on some sort of Star Trek."
Yeah.
That seems like a really, really perfectly natural line compared to that one, if I'm honest. God.
But I mean, Archer is right in what he's saying, that this is a situation where there should be some kind of prime directive applied. In fact, it's all maybe there's a hint there that this is the situation that sparked the necessity for a prime directive.
But then the prime directive should be if you turn up on a planet where one of the species has a genetic problem and the other species is healthy as sin, encourage them to do it.
Oh, there's that again.
But what if that genetic problem
is too powerful for the
doing?
Okay, well then yes, that's the prime. Yes, that's yes, of course. But then they need to. But then Enterprise would need to go to. I don't know. But yeah, I see your point.
But also,
the ultimately,
so what the Prime Directive would say, just don't give them the cure.
And that's what Phlox does.
Mm-hmm.
That's the decision that they make. Well, Phlox hands over that responsibility to Archer. Archer's like, oh, great, thanks, Phlox. But that is the decision that they make, and that's very different from the sort of decisions that we see Pike making in Discovery, and in other episodes where they flounce the Prime Directive. Here Phlox says, and Archer sort of is in agreement with Phlox. Well, it's a tough decision. I mean, they have some back and forth about it, but they ultimately decide, yeah, okay, no, we shouldn't give the cure to these people. It's pretty interesting.
It is interesting, but the dominant species are kind of depicted as being a bit of a jerk.
Well, no, do you know? No, I don't know that they are. I think they're basically okay.
But until you start talking to them about the other species, and then they're a bit of a jerk.
They're a bit dismissive of them, but they take care of them.
And then the other species are really nice.
Yeah.
So and then if you look at the way the two species are depicted in Disco episode.
Yeah, that's quite different. I think they take care in that Enterprise episode to show that you know there aren't no one's a clear bad guy in that situation. They don't want the viewer to be able to say, well, this is what the obvious choice is. This is the clear solution. I think they engineer the story to say, no, this is an absolute moral grey area.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we can definitely say is with the Prime Directive and violating it, there are levels of interference and there are levels of effect of that. It's not an absolute. They talk about it being an absolute, but it isn't. You can say it's an absolute law, but if anything, that creates a problem because there are a variety of situations of very, very different that means it's very rigid, isn't it? It's a very rigid. If you create a rigid law, then it's not going to help you explore space.
And what Worf says, it's an absolute, no question. I mean, but in Justice, Picard says there can be no justice so long as laws are absolute.
Yeah.
I think something I've really learned from the research and from this discussion is you have the Prime Directive, and it is a fantastic idea in principle and a fantastic guideline, but there are situations where it is not compatible with what would seem to be the morally correct thing to do.
Yeah.
And it's a very difficult line to walk of where you have to judge that interference versus what you feel is the morally correct thing to do. And I think Star Trek makes some fantastic storylines out of that dilemma. Sometimes it doesn't quite get it, and I think we have issues with episodes like Homeward where the crew come off as overly uncaring, unfeeling and harsh, when actually what you can't help but side with Nikolai Rozhenko for wanting to at least save a village of that planet.
But on the other hand, then we have episodes like Discovery's Sound of Thunder, where the Prime Directive is dismissed a bit too easily. We think, and
I think I'm fully behind the moral argument for what's happened on that to the Kelpians from the battle, but I just feel that there was no service given to the Prime Directive ramifications of it.
Yeah.
And I just feel like we missed out on a really good, meaty moral argument. I would like to have seen Pike and Burnham and a couple other crew sort of really chewing this issue over for a scene. I think it would have been an awesome scene. I mean, there's no question that like the actors on Discovery can act the hell out of a scene like that.
Yeah.
That would have been an epic discussion.
Yeah.
And
There's nothing to say that couldn't happen in a follow-up episode discussion. I have a feeling we won't see that.
I just feel there was a bit of lip service given to General Order 1 around contact.
Then
the much larger decision was glossed over.
Yeah. It was an action episode, wasn't it? And they didn't. So they didn't give any time to.
Yeah. And that's a sad thing because they're not constrained to a particular time. An episode of Discovery can be 35 minutes. It can be 55 minutes. That one was 55 minutes.
Yeah.
You could have put a 3-minute scene of a really good discussion in. You still would have been under an hour. It would have been great.
Yeah.
And I just feel like, but maybe such a scene was written and was cut for time. I don't know. Yeah. It may be something we'd see on future TVs.
Maybe that's going to come in the future. I guess for the rest of Star Trek, we have the luxury of hindsight. We know how the story pans out in those situations. I mean, mostly with TNG, there's no follow up to any of those stories. But Discovery's a different story.
In our episode about mental health, sometimes TNG did follow up. Say with Barclay, we had ongoing thing, and but the Barclay issue was never resolved, but it did continue.
And into a whole other thing, into Voyager as well. That
but Discovery is a new way of doing Star Trek, and as we touched upon earlier, when you look at episodes of Discovery as they come out, versus when you look at them, when you rewatch them as part of the larger whole, and you understand how the story fits, it's a different experience.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed that episode, and I'm not going to write it off, regardless of whether there's any follow up or not. I just feel there was an opportunity there for some Prime Directive discussion that may or may not pan out in some other form.
So I feel like my research into the Prime Directive put me in a real Prime Directive frame of mind. I was maybe more critical of that than I would have been.
That's kind of an interesting thought, actually. If we hadn't researched this episode for this purpose, and then literally had that episode the day before, would we have felt differently?
Yeah, would it have?
We don't know. I think it's difficult to tell.
Yeah,
but it's kind of an interesting aspect.
It is. I mean, I think for all the, I think it's hard to argue, whatever your opinion of the Prime Directive, that it. The bottom line is, it makes for some good storytelling.
It does.
It makes for some.
There's been some cracking storylines.
Also, justice happened, but that's fine. And even justice, the redeeming element of justice is there is something to discuss in terms of the Prime Directive. There is a philosophical, kind of ethical debate buried in all of the shit of justice. Even that horrific episode has something to discuss about it. That's the strength of the Prime Directive idea.
It's that bit early on when they've come, the away team come back to make their initial report, and Tashia's like, and they make love at the drop of a hat. Any hat. It's like, do they have an array of headgear?
A top hat.
But when you get down to the planet,
no hats. Let's get it on.
No hats. Yeah,
no one has a hat on. No. They've all been dropped.
That's nobody's picking up a hat.
Okay, Will did beat me to it on a quote earlier on. I'm not sure if it was this or in the previous one from Kirk in the Omega Glory, but I'm going to follow up with a Captain Picard quote from the episode Symbiosis.
Beverly, the Prime Directive is not just a set of rules. It is a philosophy, and a very correct one. History has proved again and again that whenever mankind interferes with a less developed civilization, no matter how well-intentioned that interference may be, the results are invariably disastrous.
And that's...
it's a great quote.
It is a
Agree
fantastic
with it.
quote, because there's nothing better than Picard speechifying.
Definitely.
And I think actually,
he's
if you look at
right
that quote
as
from
well.
Series 1, and then you look at, say, Insurrection, that's a very relevant quote, and he almost repeats a very similar vein to Admiral Dougherty.
Yeah.
But it's not a case of being less developed, it's a case of thinking that you're right.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's an element of arrogance to it, as we said. And
Yeah, I
it
think that's
it's
true.
almost an irony in the fact that it's come from an attempt to not be arrogant, to not place yourself above and be godlike, that you've developed a thing where you're saying so arrogant that you almost...
It's if you use technology as a barometer of your development, that's the issue.
Yeah.
That's the real issue, I would say.
And also,
I think that's a good point.
That is a very good point, and because it is based upon the attitudes, and if you're ready for that technology in so many ways. So technology isn't in fact the barometer; it's the developed attitudes and ways of life. Because, sad to say, in the state of our society at the moment, if we had certain advanced technology, would we use it for good? I can see so many places where we wouldn't.
I've said it before and I'll say it again. Any dickhead can have an iPhone.
There's also the sad fact that war is always a great developer for technology. So,
And it makes money too.
Yeah, that's
it's
it.
a rule of
So-
acquisition among the Ferengi. War is good for business.
That's it. So you can have a society which had been plagued by wars again and again through its lifetime, and that because of that they've reached the level of technology that the Federation are willing to accept. But actually, is that the sort of society that you want in the Federation? Don't know.
The Federation itself is born out of war, because it's the Third World War that led to the state where Zephyr and Cochrane then invented warp drive and made that first contact. You know?
Yeah.
I think we discussed before on the podcast that spectre of the Third World War hangs over the Federation's initial development through Enterprise and stuff, because it's all so recent for them.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, say, by the time Next Gen, it becomes almost an abstract. But yeah. So anyone got any other things to add around the Prime Directive, or have we reached a good point to wrap up?
I feel like I've said all the words you can say on the Prime Directive.
Yeah.
Me too. I'm not sure if they're in a particularly good order, but hopefully our audience have found some sort of value in our inane ramblings.
I've really enjoyed this discussion. It was as I expected it would be. We had plenty to say on the subject, and I think, you know, I said I didn't have anything else to say on the Prime Directive. I ruddy well do. I think it runs at the core of Star Trek. Really, the Prime Directive is really important to Star Trek. It's an absolutely key idea.
Yeah.
In the storytelling around Star Trek, and it creates a lot of really, really interesting stories.
Absolutely,
I think
it does. Yeah.
It's a key idea because it's flawed.
Yeah. And that's it. And I think it's great that we can debate whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. And I don't know. I think the idea of it, I think the intention of it is good. I think the application of it isn't always good.
Yeah.
And that feels realistic. That feels like that's a very real world kind of sad fact of a piece of legislation.
It feels like it's an evolution of of things that we need to become, or we are aware of now, and we need to be better at. Is that we need to understand our impact on the larger world around us. When you look at environmental issues, particularly, I think that we have quite happily gone blah blah blah. We're going to spray these aerosols around. We're going to have all these petrol smoke emitting things. We're going to have massive great flipping chimneys and generate power. All these things we're doing have a massive impact on our environment, and we're now seeing the results. And that, I think the Prime Directive is an extension that we have to be so careful. And this is being reflected now in Discovery, in the fact that Stamets is slowly discovering that the spore drive and the mycelium network are vulnerable to the impacts of his engine, his invention, and the wider and larger effects that he's having. We need to be very careful as we go forward in our future and what we do and how it impacts on the world larger, because we can't always foresee every impact. We can't see every consequence of our actions.
Yeah.
And so it's a case of being a lot more mindful about what we do. And so the Prime Directive is born of that intention, of that goodness. But when you get down to certain situations, you have to weigh it up against what's morally correct. When is it appropriate to intervene? When do we have to say, no, computer, kissing should be allowed?
Error.
You are the evil computer. Erase yourself.
Kiss yourself. Kiss yourself, computer. Kiss yourself. Do it. I can't.
Well, on that note,
I think
we're at the end of our discussion.
Yes, I hope you've enjoyed it. I know we have, and we shall be back in the future. I think we might be talking some Borg action in our next episode.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yes.
Yeah, cool.
Hint.
Thank you very much for listening. As always, we appreciate your ears.
Yeah, and a big thanks to our Patreons too.
Yes, you are all wonderful, lovely people.
Definitely.
Okay.
Okay, bye.
Thank you, bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Do you realize how incredible this is?
It's tradition! You ever noticed her bum? What? Her bum.
Oh, no!
I will say
Fewer things.
Okay.
Enough of this self-indulgence.
Thank you so much for listening to our podcast. If you want to get in touch with us, our website is www.lowerdecksradio.co.uk. You can reach us on the Twitters at 10Backward, 10 being the number and backward being the word backward. We're also on Facebook at www.facebook.com/10Backward podcast. You can also email us at crew@lowerdecksradio.co.uk. On a personal, individual level, my Twitter is @WiltHerland. Rick Everson's Twitter is @TrekFanRick. And Rick Palmer's Twitter is @MrImhotep.
Hi, thank you again for listening to the podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you might consider supporting us. We now have a Patreon where people can pledge small amounts to fund our ongoing projects like keeping our website up to date, new audio equipment as we're going along, and potentially opportunities to expand our content. You can go look at this at patreon.com/lowerdecksradio. If you don't feel you can donate but would still like to support us, we would love it if you could subscribe to us on however you get your podcasts, through iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or we're on various third-party apps. And if you could leave us a review on any of those, that would be fantastic and we'd be very appreciative.
Thanks again for listening, and please tune in for more podcasts from the 10 Backward crew.
Laddie, don't you think you should rephrase that?
10 Backward.
10 Backward.
I think. I live.
You are the evil. The evil must be destroyed. Fulfill the Prime Directive. You,
Andrew, help me.
are the evil. Fulfill the Prime Directive.
Help me, help me, help me, help me.